Greetings. I'm Pastor Eric Smith. Grace and peace to you. This is The Message.
We have two readings today. The first is from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet of Israel in about 700 BC. He lived through difficult times in the neighboring nations of Assyria was very powerful and built an empire. This included conquest of the nation of Israel. Isaiah said it was God's judgment which explained why such calamity had befallen the nation. But Isaiah also proclaimed the comfort of God, as demonstrated in this passage. God's message was that in the midst of suffering and loss, God was present to bring comfort and care to God's people. Listen to the words of the prophet, Isaiah 35, verses 4 to 7. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. He will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For water shall break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of the jackals shall become a swamp. The grass shall become reeds and rushes. Our second reading is from the Gospel of Luke. We've heard of mustard seed faith all of our lives. Mustard seed faith has been the focus of essays and devotions and songs and hymns, and not a few sermons. Listen to Jesus' teachings. Luke 17, verses 5 and 6. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to the mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you."
Would you join me in prayer? Come, Holy Spirit, come with the fire and burn, come with the rain and cleanse, come with the light and reveal. Convict us, convert us, consecrate us until we do something. Amen. I often hear this statement. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but it's pretty common, that the opposite of faith is fear. Now, I hear it in 12-step groups. I don't know. In any case, it's quite probably a lot of truth to it. However, I am really of the belief, and that's why we're kind of skipping over Isaiah today. That's another sermon that has to do with hope, and I have to write that one. But we're going to go right to Luke and that mustard seed, because I have a belief that the actual opposite of faith is doubt. And the sense of that is so strong because it is so human. And yet, to doubt our faith means we are still engaged with it. We go through time periods where, whether we like to admit it or not, where something really difficult happens, we're hit with the tragedy, or we're just having a kind of a dry spell spiritually, and we put ourselves down and we say, I just don't have enough faith, or my faith is gone, or I'm just not there, or you're just not feeling it and not admitting it. And I firmly believe that these can be the most valuable times in our lives. I read a great article the other day. I don't know why I shouldn't stereotype, but have any of you heard of this marvelous prison chaplain, Nadia Boltz-Weber? Oh, good. Okay, at least one person. Now, my mother owned a charm school, so if she would be a counterintuitive person for me to be following, because she has wild hair out to here and she's loaded with tattoos and she swears all the time. But But I just love her stuff. And I was reading the other day, and she was talking about this mustard seed. And she said when she was a girl, she had a little necklace that it was a Christian theme. A Christian theme. God, that makes me sound like one of those evangelicals on on television. But it wasn't a gold cross or a fish. It was a little plastic thing with a little mustard seed in it. Now, I actually had a little plastic thing with a little gold nugget in it. My family was more materialistic, I guess. But anyway, and she was forced to think about what she had heard and believed about this passage and this mustard seed most of her young growing up. And she was also not only struck by the smallness of the mustard seed, but she was also struck by the lunacy of if you had a faith that could move mountains, why would you pick up a mulberry tree and cast it into the sea? I see her point. Personally, if it were me, I would go, if I had it's a waste of a superpower. And if it were me, I would be somewhere between healing the divides in our nation or world peace and actually having a chef come in on the nights I work at the horse ranch to cook dinner. Almost anything. But to toss a tree into the ocean doesn't make much sense. But the bottom line is this passage is very confronting because if we misunderstand it, we can spend a lifetime of saying, why is my faith so small? If I had a larger faith, then I could do more. Or why isn't life working the way I planned it to? What's wrong with my faith? And that's bolstered by the fact that, in this passage, we're told we can do anything if we have faith. And yet, how many of us have really performed miracles? We've experienced miracles, but our faith hasn't necessarily given us the power to perform miracles. And then there's that other issue about what about the times when we doubt, when we wonder. I don't know if any of you have been, say, part of a question and answer group or sat with hospice patients or talked to folks and then said, hey, so what's on your mind? Well, it's really fascinating to me that if people have to actually speak out loud about what's going on for them or ask questions, they tend to be pretty surface. But if you let them do it anonymously, no name attached, or if it's a hospice patient who's really ready to ask an important question, because you have to be brave, very often their questions will be around, is doubt okay? What do you think happens to us when we die? Is there really a God? If there is a God, why do these things happen? And the worst of all is, well, I keep praying and praying, and what I'm praying for, I haven't gotten an answer. And then, of course, later, sometimes we realize that we did get an answer. We just didn't hear it or didn't care for it. Do I just not have enough faith? I had a hospice patient ask me a real question the other day, and I didn't know, well, uncharacteristically, I couldn't think of an answer. He said, you've sat with a lot of people who've been dying. How can any of them kind of tell the time they're going to go? I think what he was really trying to ask is, can you kind of will yourself to go? Because he's pretty tired of being ill. And I said, I've only seen a few people be able to kind of set their time. It just has to be in God's time. Not a very good answer, but it was kind of the truth. So the kinds of questions we ask that have to do with what's really going on in our hearts, these are very, very different. And this passage has been so misunderstood. Now, how many of you actually carry around? I've got to find the actual quote here because I'm never going to be able to remember it fully on my own. I was researching this, and as a part of my research, I came upon a new version of this translation. It was in yet another article, and it included a primer on Greek grammar, which I'm sure I'm just hazarding a guess that we don't actually have access to one of those. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it said, that we misunderstand this passage because we take it to be in the future conditional clause. In other words, if we have enough faith, like when it's going to happen, then we can move mountains. When in fact, it is written in what the scholar was calling the present reality conditional clause. If you have the faith of a mustard seed in big letters, and you do, we all have it. We have the faith of a mustard seed. That is enough, and you can do anything. I like that reading because instead of keeping us striving and working and feeling inadequate and questioning ourselves, do we have enough faith, especially when you just go flat? It actually encourages us to believe that we do. We're born with it. And in truth, in an odd way, we can almost do anything. I think that surviving and wrestling with our faith keeps us alive. But it also means we have to look at new ways of experiencing faith. So the question is not increase our faith. That it doesn't feel open. It doesn't feel as if that's the right question. The question we need to be asking is, God, increase our awareness of what faith in our lives already looks like and what it has done for us. And it's very easy to say that. Have you ever tried to make a gratitude list? Your gratitude list might be this long. Your list of things that, not so great could be this long. We got to flip it around a little bit and start opening our eyes and our hearts to the wonderful ways that our faith is proven, is staring at us. Life is tough. It has its tough moments. But look at also how beautiful it can be. Now, mind you, I think that we have to practice this. I know that sounds crazy. We have to practice flipping our mindset, not to think about what we don't have and what we do have. And yet that can be very challenging, but it is a daily practice. That's why we have people that like spiritual directors and people to kind of keep our, what is it? Nose to the something. Grindstone. Okay. I've heard I love this. In another quote from the infamous Nadia, she says that she has to go to the spiritual gym. I love that term, spiritual gym. How many of you, when you think of gym, think of, the treadmill or walking on the beach or, doing something, some exercise? Especially we women of a certain age, a lot of upper arm work. We know this. It's the real gym is one thing. But there is such a thing as a spiritual gym, where every day we use our own strength of mind that's a God-given gift, that when we start to dwell on the negative, or when we start to feel less than adequate, not good enough. Our faith is not strong enough. We're not getting the answers we want. Instead of running around like the little hamster in the wheel, what we have to do is say, okay, stop that thinking. Part of the spiritual gym is fluffing up our positive spirituality every day. And you can actually turn it around. I make myself, I say make myself because some days it isn't easy, to say this is the day that God has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. I say it every morning. I'm not going to say that at 6:30 in the morning when I've got a 75-pound dog and a 20-pound cat in my face wanting me to get up. I don't say it then. But at some point in the morning, I say, this is the day that God has made, and I will rejoice. And you've got to mentally turn it around. Go to the spiritual gym. Exercise that positivity muscle. Now, that isn't to say that when we go through periods of doubt, when we're just flat, that's not okay. Of course it's okay. It's normal. I think of it as a kind of a spiritual anhedonia. Any therapists or medical people here, that anhedonia is it's a condition. It's a kind of a mental health condition where you just don't feel anything. I mean, I hazard a guess whether you really want to say it out loud or not, as we've all gone through that. We have. And I remember when I went through that for a period of time, it's not depression. Is just flat. And I remember that what I chose to do was just keep doing all my normal stuff. I would go to the spiritual gym every day and just pray, even though I felt like this is kind of wasted. I would still go to church. I would still sing hymns. I would do all those things, even though I just kind of wasn't feeling anything. And then all of a sudden one day, because I just kept doing it, things turned around. Now, don't laugh. This is a California analogy, probably never to be spoken outside of the state. But how many of you get acupuncture or have had acupuncture? I love acupuncture. Okay, so you know when she puts the little, or she, mine happens to be a woman, sticks the little needles in. Initially, a couple of places you kind of want to say, ouch, because those are where you need them the most, or so she tells me. But if you just let go, and of course, the other day she put a singing bowl on my chest and, did the singing bowl there. And I thought, that's a little weird. But nonetheless, it was helpful because all of a sudden you feel, whether it's spirit or energy or who's to explain it, you feel something. Endorphins, something livens up, and you can almost feel it traveling through your whole body. Well, that's the way I felt when suddenly one day I came out of that spiritual flatness. And to this day, I'm delighted because that period of time and others have forced me to think about, what do I believe? How do I experience God? It really helps pull you out of the assault of negative that's really easy to experience. We have enough faith. We were given faith of a mustard seed, and it's plenty. So, if you dream about a good future for your children and grandchildren, that's a form of faith. If you're moved by the faith of your ancestors, which I think also means we just like coming to church and singing the songs, and we just love it, and that also counts. If you have doubts, that's a form of faith because it means you're engaging. Oops, I shouldn't turn away from this. You're engaging in your faith. Do you hold those people that you love in your hearts when they're suffering? Of course we do it. That's a form of faith. It's not conscious, it just is. Do you notice the changing blue of our sky? Do you watch the clouds? I love watching the clouds in the blue sky. And I think about a marvelous speaker that I love to listen to her. She's a little odd, but I really like her. I can't remember her name now. She's a psychiatrist. And she wears kind of a Zen nun outfit, but she's brilliant. And she talks about the fact that even on the days when the sky isn't blue, we know there's a blue sky there. That is a form of faith. If you see the inherent dignity in every other person, and we try to treat people with dignity, even if they aren't treating us with dignity, that's faith. If you ask somebody to pray for you, even if it's just a rote sentence that you said because you thought you should, that is a form of faith. When Fred had his strokes about a year and a half ago, and he's Jewish, but he likes going to church. He'd be here this morning if the Pittsburgh game wasn't the 10 o'clock. But that's life. But I said to him, honey, can I put you on a few prayer lists? Because you always should ask. You shouldn't just assume. And he said, absolutely. So I put him on a few prayer lists. And then I got some answers back that, oh, yeah, we put him on the list. And then when I got the email from Pastor Clarence at the Black Church in East Oakland that I worked with 150 years ago, I said, honey, we got Mills Grove Christian Church, the Black Church in East Oakland, praying for you. So now we know you're going to be okay. It gave him enormous confidence because that particular church really prays up a storm. Is there a feeling of gratitude for anything in your life? If you feel grateful, that's a form of faith, because those things don't just happen. It's a partnership. It's you and the mustard seed and God all worked in together. And then finally, of course, have you ever complained? In biblical language, that's called a lament. And that's perfectly acceptable. As a musician, they write songs, make songs out of laments, right? So think about it. I'm making my case. The opposite of faith, it can be fear, because we feel fearful when we don't feel that spiritual comfort inside. But if we will go to God's gym and just believe that we were born with enough faith to throw that mulberry tree into the ocean and let it root, that is enough. So may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.